Is the ex-Muslim movement getting infiltrated by groups with harmful agendas? Christians seeking to snare believers from the rapidly growing rival religion of Islam? Zionists looking to justify Israel's oppression of Palestinians? Hindu nationalists aiming to destroy Muslim opposition in India? Are ex-Muslims being exploited as a means to an end by these various groups? Well, yes and no. Hey everybody, I'm Secular Spirits, and ever since I first got seriously involved in the world of ex-Muslims on social media around 5 years ago, I've noticed some concerning trends in the discourse of some ex-Muslims and worrying patterns in the identities of the people following or sharing our content. Now I'm going to talk about a few of the biggest and most troublesome trends and patterns, and I'll explain why they're problematic. First off, we have to remember that Muslims considering leaving Islam, and ex-Muslims who've maybe lost family and their entire foundational belief system, are vulnerable. And they're coming onto ex-Muslim social media, checking out the videos of ex-Muslim YouTubers like myself, because they're seeking comfort and answers. And that's where Christian evangelists enter the stage to share the good news: Jesus loves you. Here's how that narrative goes, a narrative I've been exposed to ever since I was a Muslim kid consuming Western media. We are all already saved. We just have to accept Jesus in our hearts. To accept Jesus is to take the path of love and life. To reject him is to embark on the doomed path of hate and death, of eternal separation from God. They'll explain that if you're a Muslim or former Muslim, you're lost. But don't worry, you've almost got the right answer. You just need to take the step of loving Christ back. And so Christians will sell this narrative in comments and reposts, and they'll share links to Christian content or Christian YouTubers and TikTokers and so forth. And some of you will also have noticed that the most prominent ex-Muslim on YouTube, Apostate Prophet, consistently churns out content with David Wood, a popular Christian apologist. It's an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing, perhaps. Islam is the shared antagonist. But of course, I don't think Christians are coming into this space just to convert people to Christianity. I suspect some are doing it to seek validation for their faith by watching ex-Muslims dismantle Islam. They want confirmation that all those Muslims are misled, and Christianity is the true solution for life, that Islam, the second most popular solution, is definitively wrong, or at the very least misguided. They'll argue that Islam contains the harm that Christianity by its inherent nature doesn't. Islam is a religion of coercion, fear, violence, oppression. Christianity is a religion that you freely accept, a religion of love, peace, acceptance. Islam is the negative through which they can affirm the positivity of Christianity. Now here's the problem with this view. If you were to argue that Christianity also has Islam's negatives that I've just listed, you'd have plenty of evidence to back up your argument. For all the key differences in their doctrines, Islam and Christianity are similar in their problematic natures. Just like ex-Muslims, ex-Christians often have parallel experiences of grappling with the dogmas of their faith, similar nightmares about the punishments of hell that await them, and common ground in troubled relationships with loved ones who still believe. And if you're an ex-Muslim who bursts this bubble by pointing out these shared problems and by not just agreeing with this Christian good, Islam bad perspective, you're still blinded by your Islamic indoctrination, of course. Moving on to another group with just as blatant an agenda, let's examine the subject of Zionists. Zionism is a Jewish nationalist movement created in the 19th century with the objective of instituting a Jewish state in the Jewish people's ancestral homeland in what is now called Israel and Palestine. Today, many Zionists also support the state of Israel's violence and oppression of Palestinian men, women, and children, violence and oppression that has recently been put under magnifying glass ever since Israel began its brutal retaliation against Palestinians in Gaza in the aftermath of Hamas's attack on Israelis last year. I couldn't help but notice from my early days on Twitter the numerous flags of Israel on the profiles of some of my followers, whose bios explain their love of Israel and denounce Hamas or Muslim terrorists, etc. Now, why would they be following a bunch of ex-Muslim accounts? They do it because Zionists and the current leaders of the State of Israel want to sell this idea that Israel is embroiled in an existential conflict with Muslim terrorists who carry within them an irrational, all-consuming hatred of all Jewish people just because they're Jewish. A hatred that drives them to also seek the complete and utter destruction of Israel. By showcasing ex-Muslims' horrible experiences of living under Islam, they're saying, see, it's not just us saying that Islam is a threat. Take it from these ex-Muslims, some of whom are Arab and even Palestinian. And because Islam is a threat, so the argument goes, this justifies Israel's extreme and often violent actions against Palestinians. They're doing it to defend themselves from Muslim Palestinians who want to erase them from the planet. It's not that they want to level entire city blocks of innocent civilians, women and children included. It's that they have no choice but to do so in fighting the Muslim terrorist menace. Now this one is tricky because the devil's in the details. I go into this in much more detail in my video I shared a couple of months ago with my thoughts on Hamas's October 7 attack on Israelis. I've left a link for that in the video description below if you want to watch the whole thing. The relevant parts for this video are two things. One, simply blaming Islamic terrorism is missing the whole story. Islam-influenced hatred of Jewish people is real, and there are many Palestinians who want to destroy Israel. But a key motivator for this hate is the Israeli state's actions, its violence and oppression. Hopeless and angry Palestinians turn to Islam and ramp up their hatred because they can't find hope anywhere else. In that way, this is all a vicious cycle. Number two, the reality that many Palestinians want to destroy Israel doesn't justify Israel's violence and what it's currently doing in Gaza. Two wrongs just don't make a right. Indiscriminately bombing Palestinian civilians on a wide scale like what's happening right now will only perpetuate the cycle. And if you're an ex-Muslim who doesn't side with this Zionist perspective, it's also a perspective that's supported by many non-Zionists, I've noticed. Or even if you agree with a lot of it but call for more nuance and an end to the violence, then you're still, yep, you guessed it, blinded by your Islamic indoctrination. Funny how they cheer when you criticize Islam, but then abruptly change course when you don't go along with their agenda. And the last trend might just be the biggest one within the ex-Muslim space, and one that pretty much any ex-Muslim content creator is likely aware of: Hindu nationalism. For some background context, there's an influential force in Indian society called the Hindutva movement. Hindutva basically means Hinduness. The followers of this movement believe that the Hindu religion is the core part of the national identity and culture of India, where the demographic breakdown is roughly 80% Hindu and 14% Muslim. So where does this leave that Muslim minority? Essentially, Islam is viewed as not truly Indian, as the religion of an outsider culture. This viewpoint that Muslims don't belong has some potentially problematic implications. Since the 1920s, the RSS, a Hindutva volunteer group that has about 5 million members today, has increasingly dominated Indian society, and India's ruling party, the BJP, has close links with the group. Of course, not all Hindutva proponents support violence against Muslims or the raising of mosques and madrasas, and many Muslims and Hindus coexist peacefully in India. But sectarian violence is a real and concerning phenomenon, sometimes described as a paramilitary group of sorts. The RSS has been accused of inciting or directly participating in violence towards Muslims. In their turn, Hindu nationalists have blamed Indian Muslims for inciting or participating in violence against them. This real-life conflict has manifested between Hindus and Muslims in the UK, and it's also moved to social media, especially Twitter, where I've seen numerous posts in the ex-Muslim space promoting Hindu nationalism or the Hindutva movement specifically, and other posts saying Muslims don't belong in India or aren't true Indians and that they should just leave. While it is true that Muslim practices and culture are foreign to the Indian subcontinent and initially imposed through conquest, Muslims have now been living in India for centuries, and their institutions and practices are embedded into the social fabric at this point. I'm not a fan of Islam. Calling for a new vision in India that excludes them is dangerous and can only lead to violence that will beget more violence. And the reasons for Hindu nationalist attraction to ex-Muslim content is clear and quite similar to the Zionist motivations. They want Islam taken down a notch and want to see it demonized so that their own religious nationalism looks good and prevails. Now, if you go back to my answer on the question of whether or not the ex-Muslim movement has been infiltrated, you'll recall that I said yes and no. I don't think this can be boiled down to a simple yes or no, because I don't think anyone has the right to define what is a legitimate part of the ex-Muslim movement and what is an illegitimate infiltration. After all, much in the same way that there is no singular atheist movement or philosophy or religion, ex-Muslims are solely defined by what they aren't. They just aren't Muslim anymore. You won't know anything else about them besides that fact. Ex-Muslims can fall across the political spectrum. Some might hate Islam. Some might just not believe it anymore but still admire it. Some might now practice another religion. Some might be militant atheists, as they're sometimes described, perhaps to, strike fear into the hearts of believers that armies of hedonist atheists are coming to invade their cities. And some ex-Muslims are now specifically Christian. Some support Zionism, and others may even support the Hindutva movement. Those ex-Muslims are free to support those various religions or movements, and it's legitimate for just about anybody, ex-Muslims and others alike, to support them and participate in this space. But then I'm also free to disagree with them and point out how they're potentially harming ex-Muslims with their agendas, particularly vulnerable ex-Muslims who aren't aligned with any other religion or a nationalist movement, because I think the biggest value of this space is for it to be a community forum to process and heal from the emotional and sometimes physical trauma of being Muslim. So that's why I speak out against other organized religions and religiously fueled nationalism, because the toxic aspects of Islam that cause that trauma to Muslims and ex-Muslims can be found in these other systems of control and discrimination, which share with Islam the problem of dividing people and inspiring hate. So what's my agenda then? Because obviously we all have agendas. I want us all to respect each other's humanity and focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. That might sound like empty rhetoric, but I believe taking this step can dramatically reduce the conflict in our day-to-day individual lives and in the world as a whole if we all practiced it. Shedding divisive religious and nationalist movements is a big part of that step. So I'm not going to say any of these groups aren't allowed to follow ex-Muslim content or promote their agendas. I'm just simply saying that I think they're wrong for doing so. And that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I'm Secular Spirit, and I'll be back with another video very soon.